Rob, thank you so much for coming on the show. You're a huge movie star, man. You're like,
You're giving me too much credit there. I'm in movies, and I've been lucky enough to be in some really fun movies for sure.
and I think the first time that you came on my radar as just a lowly regular citizen is The Daily Show. Is that? But how did your career get started?
It was it was something I always wanted to do. I was a theater and film major in college. In high school, I did a thing called forensics, which was kind of like, improvised duet acting, and then you do scene work, and you did it on the weekends. It was kind of, it was a competition thing, but it was there wasn't much behind it. It wasn't theater, that's for sure. But it
Kind of
was
like
fun.
improv? Is that what that? Is that what?
Yeah, kind of. There was elements of that, but there was also, you could prepare scenes as well. Like they had different categories. Like I remember DA was duet acting. So you and a scene partner would work up a scene and go do it. And you do it for three different judge panels, and then they would vote on you. And then there was improvised duet acting, IDA, and that was improvised stuff where they'd give you a subject, and you'd have to come up with something. So I always enjoyed that stuff, but I just didn't think it was very realistic as far as making a living, and so I just didn't think it was real. But as I got out of college, and I had my pilot's license, so I got a guarantee. I took this test, the AQTFAR or whatever, but I scored well enough that I got a flight contract with the United States Marine Corps, and I always wanted to serve. So I was like, well, I'm going to do this, because if I, as a theater and film major from the University of Kansas, or any other university, really, you're going to be a waiter for a long time.
Yeah.
Or I could be Top Gun, and I was like, Top Gun, waiter, Top Gun. So I figured I would do that. So as I went through, officer candidate school, the basic school, aviation indoctrination, primary flight training, intermediate flight training, and I was down in Quantico, and then I was down in Pensacola, and then I was in Corpus, and I was doing all this training, and it was fine. I was enjoying it, but I felt a calling, and I had some friends who were up in Chicago doing Second City and Improv Olympic and some things up there, and they reached out and said, Riggle, you got to do this. You got to do it. It's what we did in college, only it has a name. It's called improv, and you really got to do it. And they planted the seed, and it got me thinking. And I thought, if I pin on those wings, they're going to have me for 10 years, maybe even 11 by the time my contract was up.
Sure.
And at that point, I don't think I'd get out. I'd only have 9 years to retirement, and I didn't think I'd get out. So all of a sudden, I was like, "Wow, how they got me for 20 years? I didn't. I want to try acting and comedy before I die." So I switched out of flying to the ground side, became a ground officer, and then when I finished my ground tour, I got myself to New York and started pursuing comedy and acting there.
Where
Um,
did you go
and
on tour? What did the like? Did you go to Iraq?
as far as military tours,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry, military.
oh, I had a bunch of different deployments. Uh,
That's what it's called. I don't
96.
know why I called it tour. Yeah, deployment. Sorry. Well, where'd you go on tour, dude? You get all the major
Yeah,
cities.
hey, there's a great comedy club in Baghdad called the Chuckle Hut. No room, but great place. No, 96, I helped evacuate the embassy in Liberia, Africa. 99, went to Kosovo and Albania. And then in 2001, 2002, I went to Afghanistan two different times. So those were my deployments. And it's so funny because I ended up spending a total of 23 years in the Marines, 9 years on active duty and 14 in the reserves. Um, and while I was in the reserves, I was on Saturday Night Live. I was on The Daily Show. I was making movies. I was, still and still going to command and staff college down at Miramar on the weekends, and still honoring all my military commitments. But yeah, so it was a convoluted journey, one that probably most people don't take, but and I'm giving you the Reader's Digest version because it would
Yeah,
take,
sure.
if I went step by step, it would take forever, and probably boring as molasses. So those are the right Reader's Digest version. I got myself to New York. I started grinding down at the UCB theater. Well, first I did stand up and I hated it.
Why did
Then
you hate it? That's
well, because it
interesting.
sucked. It sucked. It the people are grumpy and nasty, and the place I didn't know. I just knew I wanted to do comedic acting or comedy. I
Yeah.
was very nebulous. I didn't have a clear vision, other than I wanted to be on Saturday Night Live. Which when I quit flight school, um, I wrote in the back of the book that I was reading at the time, because I'd never quit anything in my life up to that point. And I said, "Hey, look, if I do this, if I give up on flight school, then it's got to count. It's got to matter. So what am I going to do? What am I going to accomplish?" And the first thing I wrote was, I'm going to get on Saturday Night Live. And that was, I think, in September of 94. And September or sorry, that would have been August of 94, I think. And August of 2004, 10 years almost to the day, I got a call from Lauren Michaels asking me to join the cast of Saturday Night Live. So it took 10 years, a couple wars. I got married in that time frame. I had a kid, like there was all kinds of distractions, but I kept my eye on the prize, and that was to get on Saturday Night Live, and I did it. And um, I got back from Afghanistan at the end of 2002, kind of the beginning of 2003, and then I got SNL in 2004. So it wasn't long after I had got home that I got SNL, and then SNL was gone like that, really fast. Oh, by the way, let me go back
Yeah.
again. I'm giving you the Reader's Digest, so I may
No,
be
this is
burning
great.
some of these details, but the book that I wrote in the back of and I said I'm going to accomplish these certain goals if I do this. It was Tony Robbins' Unlimited Power, and I had just
You're
finished it.
kidding.
And no, absolutely, Tony was a huge inspiration for me, as far as taking the time to identify what it is I really want in this life, and also, to believe that it's in the realm of possibility for me, and that I just have to, apply myself, take the action steps. Everybody dreams, but it's not until you start scheduling and making appointments and making calls and taking classes and doing the work, taking the action steps, that will start to build that ladder to get where you want to go. And it seems so basic and so easy and so simple. It's not. It's
Yeah.
it's easier said than done, uh, as is all personal growth. But I did find that it is true. If you take the action steps, things will happen. Results will appear. So anyway, that's how I got to New York. I grinded for 7 years. I was at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater. I was very lucky to be there because there were some great comedians that were up and coming, and the founding members were Amy Poehler and Matt Walsh and Matt Besser and Ian
Oh,
Roberts. And
wow.
so I was learning from some of the best improvisers in the country, and I was getting to play with great talented people who have gone on to amazing things. Um, and so I felt like I got a master's degree in comedy, by being there for 7 years, doing shows, sketch shows, improv shows, teaching, coaching, doing tech for other people's shows, whatever it took to be around the theater. That's what I did, with the hopes of getting an opportunity. And I was lucky enough to get an opportunity. Um, so
Yeah,
that's it.
the
A
pinnacle of
lot
any
going on there. I know.
comedian's
Sorry.
career is Saturday Night Live, right? Like that's the goal. Like if you can get on Saturday Night Live, how incredible is that? So how did that come about? Was it through the group you were with Polar and others who made that introduction? You did the tryouts. How did that come about?
Well, that's just it. You have to be invited to audition. You just can't
Yeah.
go knock on the door and say, I'd like to audition. So, every year, we'd always, everybody at the theater would be like, hoping that someone had put in a good word, or someone had come and seen something that we had done, or you just, I don't know, you kind of grind and hope that the work you're doing is being noticed, I guess. And usually the way, Lauren and the producers over there, they walk around to the writers and the other cast members and they say, hey, who should we be looking at? Who's out there that we need to have on our radar? And they kind of have a sense of these things. And for whatever reason, somebody had mentioned my name. It might have been, I think, Amy or Horatio, because they were on the cast at the time and they were spending a lot of time at the UCB. So I think I got on the radar that way. And then, you just make the most out of your opportunities. So I prepared my audition as best I could and tried to, do my best.
What did you do for your audition? What? Because isn't it? I mean,
Well, I'm not a
like I know
stand-up.
anything. Yeah.
Stand-up comedians, if they're invited to audition, they usually do their best 5 to 7 minute routine, whatever their best 5, 7 minutes material. If you're an improviser like me, you do characters and impersonations. Well, I don't do very good impersonations. I do better characterizations. Kind of like, I think Will Ferrell's really good at characterizations. His Bush and stuff like that are very good. Not necessarily like Daryl Hammond, who's a savant when it comes to impersonation, right? He hits the voice, the tone, all that stuff. Or Frank Caliendo, he has that kind of ability where he can hit he's an impersonator. So I don't do impersonations that well. I can do more characterization. So I created 3 original characters and I did 3 impersonations. And that was my 6 minutes because each character got a minute. And I tried to create a funny monologue for each character and tried to make them different and unique so that I could show a little range or whatever you want to call it. And that was it. And then, you put it together and then the whole process of auditioning is, it's kind of a gauntlet. But I was the only guy hired that year, which is I was blessed to be hired. It was a dream come true, and I'm always eternally grateful for that. I don't have a bad thing to say. I wish I would have got more time on the show, but it wasn't meant to be. But I have no regrets about anything that happened, other than I wish I would have trusted myself a little bit more. As the season went on, I started to lose my voice a little bit and tried to please like 20 masters, and if you try to please 20 people, you don't please anybody. And so I kind of lost, the vision of how I got there and what made me unique. So that was a good lesson though. It was an important lesson that I learned and I haven't forgotten it. I never will. So.
And you were on for that one season?
Yeah. 2004, 2005. It was an election year. So normally SNL on an election year gets a big bounce in the ratings because everybody tunes in to see their election coverage and, the mock debates and it's a very funny time. It's always a great time to be on the show during election year. For whatever reason, that election was not popular. It was Kerry and Bush and nobody cared. So the ratings, we didn't get a big ratings bounce. And when that happened, I think the people at NBC panicked. And they were like, we're not getting the ratings. Something's going on. So they made a big overhaul. And I was the last one in, first one out. So I got caught up in that. But I have no regrets. I was very proud of the season I had and the amount of time I got on. Because, when you're the only new guy on the cast of 15, you're lucky to see airtime. And I saw a lot of airtime and I got sketches on and I got characters on. And so I was happy. But circumstances I don't think were necessarily on my side.
And where did you go after Saturday Night Live?
Into a deep depression. No, I do remember when I didn't get my contract extended. I did have a little pity party for about 15 minutes where I felt really bad for myself and felt cheated and felt robbed. And I was like, this is bullshit. Or sorry for the language, but this is,
you can say bullshit. It's fine.
And I was hurt. I was hurt. I was embarrassed. I was sad. I felt ashamed. All these terrible feelings, they flood in, and they will take you down if you let them. And then I kind of realized, okay, well, I remember I was at my parents' lake house and the whole family was upstairs and they knew I was getting this call. And when I came back up, they were all, all right, are we extended? Are you going back? And I had to say, no, it's over. And that hurt a lot. I didn't want to tell them that. And then my wife
Mm.
and I had just had a baby, and uh, so it was over. The pity party was over pretty quick because I was like, well, I need money, so I got to get back to work. So I got on the phone with my manager, and I was like, okay, that's done. So what's next? How where's my next paycheck coming from? Because I got some people who are looking at me, and I need to pay rent, and I need to get food, and all that stuff. So what's next? And that was it. I uh, uh, started grinding, and then I went about a year of just I had a writing. My partner at the time, my comedy partner at the time, we got a pilot deal to write a script, a pilot for NBC, which we did. It didn't get picked up, but at least it was a little bit of a payday. And then I just was, scrapping for work for about a year. And then I got a chance to audition for The Daily Show. And I auditioned out in LA and got invited to New York to meet with John and audition in the studio. And I think there was 3, 4 other guys there. And I went in, I did my audition. I felt like I screwed it up because we were supposed to do one. They used previous, stories and scenes or whatever, or previous correspondent bits.
Right.
One was supposed to be in front of the green screen standing, and then the other one was supposed to be at the desk with John. So I went out, and I had never used a teleprompter. I don't know teleprompter from a hole in the wall. I've seen them. I know what they are, but I'd never used one. And so I wasn't very comfortable with it. It was, it was scrolling and I was trying to read, and I was more focused on that than being present. And so I asked if I could do a practice. And so they rolled the script, and I'm just reading it, but I'm thinking, okay, I'm just trying to get familiar with some of the words. And then, okay. And then John was like, that was great. Come on over, have a seat. And I thought, oh no, that was, if that's, I was just screwing around. That wasn't my real read. I wanted to say, let me do it for real this time. But he called me over to the desk. So I was like, well, shit, duh. So now I go over to the desk and I sit down, and he goes, let's do the desk piece. And I'm like, I'm kind of in a state of shock. So I'm like, okay, yeah, absolutely. But I'm trying to be cool, but I'm not. And I got this panic going on. All I'm thinking about is I want to get back over there and do the green screen again. That's all I want to do. Meanwhile, I'm in the middle of reading this other scene like I was in 4 different places at once. I was all screwed up. But I guess I did well enough. I don't know. John, we had a laugh. We shook hands. He said, thanks for coming in. They sent me back to the green room. And I remember I called my wife at the time, and this was the summer of 2006. And I was like, well, honey, I screwed it up. I'm sorry. I don't know. I try to explain everything just like I explained to
Mm.
you. And I said, but don't worry, don't panic. I was a major in the United States Marine Corps at the time, and it was the summer of 2006, and they needed, all hands on deck. So I was like, because we were at the end of our money, we didn't have any more money. So I said, all right, I'll go back on active duty. If we don't get the job, I'm going to go back. I know who to call. They're going to pick me up in a heartbeat. I have a very high security clearance.
Yeah.
They're not going to say no. So I'll go back. Now I'll probably have to deploy. It won't be like I'll be here in the States, but but I'll go back on active duty. We're not going to starve. I remember just promising her, we're not going to starve. We're not going to be out in the street. We're going to be fine.
Mhm.
One way or the other, we're going to get paid. We're going to get a payday here. But I had really thought that, I was going to have to go back on active duty the next week, or at least put in a phone call and see if I could. And I went and sat in the green room and waited for them to come in and politely say, thanks for coming in. And, here's your return ticket home. And they didn't. They came in and said they enjoyed it, and they offered me the job, which I was thrilled, thrilled as you can imagine, and I was so grateful. Um, but the problem was they only gave me a 6 month, you know, probationary period. It wasn't like you're hired, you're in, it's done. It's hey, you got the gig for 6 months because they
Yeah.
want to reserve the right to, you know, let you go if you turn out to be crazy or you don't work hard or you're not getting it or whatever. They, you know, they reserve the right to kick you out the door. So it started at 6 months. I was like, okay, great, but that doesn't mean I can move my family all the way from LA, which I just moved them out to LA. Now I'm back in New York. Now I can't move them out there for 6 months, you know, because what happens in 6 months if we're, you know, if I'm out? So I'm like, ah. So I go, I do the first 6 months. I on Craigslist, I found a studio apartment from some very nice lady who was going over to Spain to get her master's degree for the next 2 years. So I was like, all right. So it was furnished, you know, but it was a little studio. So I had a bed. So and the rent was reasonable because you know you're not getting rich on the Daily Show. You're not
Yeah.
getting paid a lot of money. So uh, I took the gig, got the apartment, and then every third weekend I would fly home because that's really all I could afford. Um, and I would see my wife and daughter. So it was a hard life. It was you know I was we were a lot of family separation, and then also I was still in the reserves, and I still had to go to command and staff college. When you're a field grade officer, you have to go to command and staff. That's the professional school you have to go to at that particular level. And so, and that's a 2 year school that when you do it the way I'm doing, which is on weekends. So I would fly home, pick up my family at the airport. We'd drive down to Miramar in San Diego. We'd stay at a hotel off base. I would go to class all day, study Clausewitz and, you know, naval doctrine and
Wow.
all this stuff. And then I would get done with that. I'd go back to the hotel, swim in the pool with my daughter. We would order a pizza or something to the room. My daughter, my wife at the time, and I would eat pizza and have gummies and watch you know, Mickey Mouse Club until my daughter fell asleep, and then my wife and I would step out on the patio and we'd sit there and catch up as much as we could. And then the next day I'd get up and go back to command and staff college on base, and they'd go to Legoland. Then we'd meet back in the evenings, and we did that all weekend until Sunday. When I was done on Sunday, we'd go play or have, you know, dinner somewhere or whatever. Then they would drive me up to LAX, drop me off at the airport. I'd take the red eye back to JFK, land the next morning on Monday morning, and then take a cab from JFK to the Daily Show with my suitcase and be ready for work that morning.
Wow.
So, and you know, that went on for 2 years. But what happened was when I initially started, it was 6 month increments. So I couldn't move anybody out on sync. You know, it was always,
Mhm.
hey, you passed this test. Good job. You get another 6 months. And I was like, you know, great. I'm happy, but you're killing me. You know, give me the gig, lock me in so I can move the family out here or not. And then finally, after that first year, like 6 months, 6 months, then after that first year, they go, hey, congratulations. We're giving you a year. Now you don't have, you know, now it'll be a full year. I was like, that's still just 1 year. Yeah. It's not worth moving. You know, the cost of moving everybody out to coast. And then when they get out here, you don't pay me enough to live in New York. I'd have to find an apartment in Jersey, and I'm on the road all the time anyway. It's always a challenge, always a challenge. So doing about 3 years on the Daily Show and long distance before finally I just had to say, I got to go home. I got to go home.
By the way,
And that's what I
you were incredible on the Daily Show. You
Oh,
were unbelievable. I mean, I remember like you were at the height of the Daily Hill show's cultural significance, at least in my mind, in my experience, in my world. The Daily Show was really powerful and really part of the ethos of America and the conversation when you were on it, right? And you had like this all-star cast. You had, you know, Jon Stewart as the host, obviously, who has become like an American icon. Just won like the Mark Twain Prize Award and all these types of things. What was
as
your
well he should.
experience? Yeah, what was your experience like with John, and was Colbert there at the time too? And like, no, he'd already left to do the Colbert show.
Yep.
But wasn't that all
So
happening at the same time?
Stephen had left the show, and then Cordry and Helms had just left. And so there was two openings, and it just so happens they hired John Oliver, and then they hired me.
Yeah,
Um,
another incredible
we,
comedian, John Oliver.
yeah, oh, I was so lucky too because John and I ended up sharing an office, and for years. And he was the one who got me back into doing stand up because he did stand up and he was very good at it. And I didn't like it very much, but I used to drag him down to the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, and I'd say, "Hey, just do monologues for the Ass Cat show on Sunday nights." And you make it up. It's easy. They give you a suggestion, you make up a story, or not make up, but you tell us a story that reminds you of, and then we do scenes on it. It'll be easy. So he did it because he's a natural comedian and he knows how to tell a story and he doesn't need any preparation, and he's very funny man. Um, and then he was like, "All right, now you got to come with me and do stand up." And I was like, I hated stand up, but at the time, basically I was as the Marines call it, a geographical bachelor because I was, I had that small little studio apartment. When I got done with work, I would walk because I was all the way on the other side of town. I was on Second Avenue, and the Daily Show is over on the West Side Highway, on like 11th Avenue. And so I would have to walk all the way across town, back and forth, back and forth. So when I got done with work, I would just walk, and it was beautiful. It was like almost a mile and a half, 2 mile walk back to my
Mhm.
apartment. I loved it. I always loved that walk. It was decompression. And but I'd stop at Chipotle, get a burrito bowl, and go back to my apartment and wait until about midnight my time. There would be 9 o'clock West Coast because that's about when my ex or my wife at the time would put down my daughter, and I could call and we could have conversations. So that was my life. And then finally, John was like, "Forget that. We're because if you jumped in a cab in New York, you could hit 5 open mics pretty easy." And that's what we did. We just started getting in cabs and jumping. We'd go down to the slipper room, the piano room, all these different clubs, and we'd sign up and we'd start building material, start building sets, trying to make each other laugh. And that's kind of how I ended up doing stand up, even though that wasn't something I had primarily. But I always thought it was important to do stand up. If you're a comedian, you got to have the full wheel: comedic acting,
Yeah.
improv, sketch, stand up. I think you should have all the spokes in the wheel. So I was glad to do that, and I was glad to work with John, and I learned a lot from being on that show, for sure.
What was your sense of the cultural significance of the Daily Show at that time?
Well, John Stewart used to get upset when people said, I only watch the Daily Show for my news. And he would be like, "Don't. That's a bad idea. Don't do that. We're a comedy show." He would say, and he would say, "We have sock puppets on right after us doing crank phone calls." So he was adamant about that. But I understand, people watched and they wanted to hear the take on it. A lot of times I always compare it to the court jester, in a king's court. The only person sometimes who could speak the truth to the king was the court jester.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you need those folks. You need some comedic voice. You need the jester to be able to speak the truth to whoever's in power. Um,
Were you
and we,
political? Are you political? Was that like a natural for you?
well, I have an opinion
Sure.
on everything. But I don't necessarily share it with everybody. Um, just because it's not necessary for me to do that. If I ever feel it is necessary, I will. But for the most part, my job is comedy.
Yeah, that's incredible. So what happened after you left the Daily Show? Where did you go?
Um, movies. I started doing more movies. Started doing um, uh, The Hangover. Started, I think that's kind of where it started. Hangover, and then Step Brothers, and The Other Guys, and 21 Jump Street, 22 Jump Street. Um, Let's Be Cops. Just movies. I started doing movies, and then I got more TV offers. I made a lot of pilots. with me as the lead that never went anywhere. But that's, I always kind of put my head down about that. I was like, oh, that sucks. It didn't work out. But I've talked to so many actors in this town. They're like, oh my God, I did 8 pilots. I did 12 pilots. I did five, and then you realize, oh, people do pilots all the time that never pan out. There's a bulk of pilots that never panned out or never got made into TV shows that could have been made into TV shows and would have been very successful, but for whatever reason, and you never know what the reasons are. It could be political. It could be, uh, go down the laundry list of reasons why something
Sure.
doesn't happen. Um, and that's fine. Again, any day I get to work in this business, I consider it a blessing. It is a gift to be able to work in show business, so I don't take it for granted. I'm always
Well, you've
happy to
had
work.
some incredible roles in these movies. I mean, the best scene in Hangover is when you're shooting Zach Galifianakis in the head with the. I mean, that's the highlight of the whole movie. It's incredible. What are you up to now? I mean, I mean, I know you're still acting. I know you're still doing comedy and all that type of stuff. But we got introduced through you coming to speak at an event I put on for kind of like the tech and business community in the state of Utah. I wonder, like, what is your connection with like entrepreneurship and business and that kind of world that led you to our stage?
Well, I love business. As TR said, the business of America is business. So I love entrepreneurship, and I love entrepreneurs because, in my opinion, small business owners, innovators, people that think and do and build, those are the people I want to be around. I love their inspiration and their motivation. I love their dedication. I love everything they do. So I really, and I enjoy hearing about new innovations, and I love hearing stories of people who have, taken their dream, their vision, and found a way to make it happen. There's something about that is very inspiring to me, and something that I wish would catch on. So, and I'm always looking to be a part of a business or grow a business, or you know, because I'm always interested to hear how people solve problems. It's fascinating, and I love watching the creativity. And you'll find the best creativity, not necessarily on the silver screen, but entrepreneurs trying to solve problems. I always appreciate that, and I think that's how I came to the event that you put on, which is a great event, by the way. I really enjoy it. I
Oh,
really
thank you.
enjoyed listening to the presenters and speakers you had there. They were absolutely amazing. So, yeah, you can always learn. You can always learn. People, if someone sits down and shares with you an anecdote or whatever, listen, soak it up. I think that's a problem, and here's the old man, here's the gray beard in me going, oh, these kids today. But if someone who has been successful wants to share a story with you, listen. Just listen.
Yeah.
Just that's all you got to do. You don't have to critique it, you don't have to judge it, you don't have to comment on it. Just soak it up. Soak it up from the perspective of, wow, okay, so that's how you approached it. Why did you do that? Why didn't you do this? Did you ever think about this? Was that even an option at the time? And how did you come to make that decision? And I think you can learn so much. And you don't have to crash yourself against the rocks to learn it. If someone says, hey, go this way and you won't die, go that way.
Yeah.
Um, it may save you about 5 years. I love opportunities like that to go to events, uh, like,
And, and
Silicon
you've been
Slow Show.
living the entrepreneurship journey. I mean, the story that you just described of your career and putting in the time and putting in the hours and work. I mean, that's entrepreneurship, man. That's what you were doing all those years. And like I can't even imagine the strain that takes on your personal life, having to be away from your family that long and keep pursuing this dream and all that type of stuff. I mean, that's the hard stuff, right?
It is. It is. And sometimes you get it right and sometimes you get it wrong. sometimes you are on a hot streak, and then sometimes you make mistakes, and then sometimes people in your life let you down, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's just life. And I think that's one of the takeaways I'm learning is I always continue seeking out personal growth, because I think, as Tony Robbins talks about, constant and never ending improvement. I love that phrase. And I think that's just one of the mantras of my life. But how you react to failure, how you react to disappointment, how you react to hardship or betrayal or any of those really negative things that can happen and will happen at some point in your life. You're going to be faced with adversity. Everybody is. And sometimes when it rains, it pours. And that's when your character gets tested. That's when your mindset gets tested, and you have to figure out a way to keep moving forward. And if you do that, in my opinion, you're going to be fine. You're going to make it. You're going to accomplish whatever it is you set out to do.
Yeah, you're the man in the arena, man. You called him TR, which I love. But Teddy Roosevelt, um, my favorite president, might be. It sounds like it
Oh my
might be it
gosh.
might be yours as well. I mean, what have you learned from studying his life? And I mean, everything you just described is like, man, this guy has studied Teddy Roosevelt.
Well, I do. I love. I remember I read. There's a trilogy of biographies,
Right.
and I remember I read I don't know, maybe the middle one first or something, but
Well,
I
the
just
first one
remember.
always sucks because it's always about the childhood, and it's like, all right, get
Yeah,
on with it. We all had
but
childhood.
but I loved his childhood too, because
Yeah,
he went
no,
from
yeah,
this sickly kid who couldn't do much until basically his dad, I think, came in and said, either you get tough or the world is going to run over you like a steamroller, and there's nothing you can do about it.
yeah,
And it kind of dropped the gauntlet in front of him, and he willed himself, with a trainer and with help, but willed himself to become this robust, powerful character who leaned into the pain, who leaned into his weaknesses and turned them into strengths. This sickly kid couldn't do anything. He was just this weak kid, and became this boxing champion in college and wore spectacles, but still was just. And the one thing I remember about him specifically was after reading, was his boundless energy,
yeah,
which is necessary. It's necessary if you want to accomplish the things that you have in your mind, the dreams, the hopes, the desires, the wealth, whatever it is. And don't be ashamed of it. If you want to be rich, don't be ashamed of that. If you want
yeah.
to be successful in business, don't be ashamed of that. If you want to be a politician, don't be ashamed of that. But if you want it, it's going to require a boundless amount of energy. You are going to have to put it in. Don't come at me and tell me my dreams aren't coming true, and I'm putting in 70% effort. Well, I mean, I can tell you why. I can tell you why. If you want it, it's going to require no less than 100%, and probably more like 105 to 110%, which you don't think you have, but it's there. You just got to tap into it. And that's what it's going to take. And people I don't think they sign up for that when they start on their journey to success. They're like, I'll give it 2 or 3 years. And if it's not happening by then, I'm out.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not how it's going to work. It requires that level. And so when I would read about TR, I was always blown away because his energy was boundless. I mean, the guy held every major job there was, all the way
Uh-huh.
up to the presidency and including the presidency of the United States. This guy, there wasn't anything he wouldn't do. And then when he had the job, it wasn't just to get the title of police commissioner of New York or assemblyman or the secretary of the Navy or whatever. He made radical changes. He would walk when he was police commissioner in New York. He would go out in the wee hours of the morning and walk beats and spy on the police to see if they were doing their job. And he would get the pulse of what was really going on. not just sit in his ivory tower and get reports from his lieutenants. He would go out there and do the work and would see with his own eyes. And same thing when he went out west and started exploring out west. He would chase down criminals. He organized his own military unit and took them to war, and then charged up the hill and got the Medal of Honor. And then when the military wasn't taking care of his troops, he risked everything to take care of his men. Court martials and everything. Like, the man was just a tremendous leader who meant what he said and said what he meant and did what he said. And that energy, that boundless energy, I don't think it's ever been repeated, but I think if you did it, or if you commit to it, you'll have amazing results in your life.
Yeah, and just like being true to himself was always fascinating, and being ready to seize moments. I mean, he became president after an assassination. I mean, like, he was vice president, and the president was assassinated. It's like, you're the president now. This is crazy. It's funny you bring up, like, he goes out west. One of my favorite Roosevelt stories is, they're like, "Where's the president?" He's like, "I think he's hiking around in Yellowstone." Like, they're like, and how do you get a hold of the president in Yellowstone in those days, right? Like, it's just like, the president's in Yellowstone. We'll see when he comes back.
Yeah, hope he comes back. Hope it all works out.
It's pretty incredible. I love that you study him. That's really cool. I have a huge affinity for him as well. What's next for you, Rob? What are you working on these days?
Well, unfortunately, there's a writers and an actors strike going on, so that's kind of sidelined
Oh
everybody.
yeah, what's that like? What's the town like right now?
Oh, it's frustrating. I think it's frustrating. I think nobody wants to be on strike. People want to work. Everybody wants to work, but you do get to a point where you have to carve out some space for yourself and for the future. And I think what started out as a residuals fight is probably turning into more of a AI battle, and that's always a little always a little scary because nobody knows what that's going to be. It's
Yeah.
all uncharted water. So, but it's something that's necessary. We got to talk about it. We got to figure out what all this could potentially mean and what it means for everybody in the industry. So, I always believe in people that I understand people get emotional and people can dig their heels in and people you know want to win their little want to win their wars battles or whatever, but eventually people will come together and will work things out and come to some sort of understanding is my hope. And it's the hope of everybody. We can work this out sooner rather than later. But yeah, the industry's kind of slowed down right now.
Yeah, what is the overall sense in Hollywood of AI and the transformational effect that could have on the industry? And I mean, obviously, every industry is looking at what is AI going to do, but in particular in the creative space and just like the tools that are coming out daily with it, I'm sure it almost feels like an existential crisis to Hollywood.
It could be, I mean, I can't speak for everybody in town, and
Sure.
and I don't have a tremendous depth of knowledge of AI. I just know that it's a burgeoning technology that is has so many potential ramifications to this industry. Nobody knows what it means yet. What is it? How good is it going to be now? How good is it going to be 5 years from now? What what can it do that how's it going to replace humans? How can it be trusted? There's all kinds of X factors that I don't know enough about to speak. I don't want to start shooting my mouth off on something I don't really understand that well, other than I understand that it's a threat. It's a problem unless we get some sort of understanding of it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's super. Are you touring? Are you doing any stand up anywhere?
No, I haven't done stand up in
Now I
years. I
use
just
touring in the right. See how I used it the right
Yes,
way
there
that
you
time?
go. Yeah, absolutely.
What if I would have said, "Are you deployed? Are you deployed around cities yet?"
Um, I haven't deployed anytime recently, and I haven't done any touring, and that's fine. Touring is a hard life. The life on the road is really hard. It's
Yeah.
really hard, uh, especially when you're doing stand up. You get done with that last show around 12:30 in the morning, 1 o'clock. Your adrenaline is cooking, so because you just did two shows and you're you're at your height of your adrenaline flow. So you got to calm down. That takes till about 3 a.m. Then you got sleeping. So then you go have a breakfast somewhere at a late night diner, about 4, 5. Then you go to bed and you gain weight. It's the worst. It's the worst. It's hard. It's a hard life. So I haven't toured in a while, but I'm always developing. That's Glenn Ross, very famous. Always be closing, right?
Yeah,
ABC.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I kind of twisted that into ABD. Always be developing. In my industry, you have to be developing because unless you're you know uh, one of about 10 A-listers, Brad Pitt or someone, you know, no one's writing scripts and it's turning them into me. So I have to create a lot of my own stuff and create my own material and my own shows and hope that I can get those going. And then while I'm doing that, obviously I'm still trying to find work in front of the camera and just like everybody else, just try to be a working actor.
That's incredible, man. Well, I'm such a huge fan of you and all the work that you've done, and appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you coming to speak, and yeah, let's stay in touch, man. Because yeah, you're living the entrepreneurial journey always. I mean, that it feels like in some ways maybe even more so than actual entrepreneurs, which is kind of great.
Absolutely. No, I'm always trying to build businesses outside of show business. I'm also trying to build businesses within show business. So yeah, I'm very much into entrepreneurship and I love business. I love capitalism, and I like to see things flourish and grow.
Well, I appreciate you doing this, man. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Rob.